Just a couple days ago, I saw the Led Zeppelin movie, Becoming Led Zeppelin, the brand new documentary in IMAX. And let me tell you, it is astounding. You definitely want to go see it in theaters because of that wonderful professional sound system that theaters have. You want to feel that music absolutely going through your body, and it will make you want to get up and scream. It is extraordinary. Now we get interviews with all of the band members, including John Bonham. The directors have resurrected tapes recorded in Australia that give us interviews with John Bonham never heard before. So those are really extraordinary, and they fit into the movie extremely well. We see interviews with all the other three members, and they tell us a little bit about how they came to come together to form Led Zeppelin. Some of those stories will be pretty familiar if you're a big fan of Led Zeppelin, but hearing the individuals actually tell the story and the enthusiasm in their eyes and the nostalgia is really quite extraordinary. Now, the music. We want to go see the movie for the music, and the directors do the job well. They play whole songs. They don't play little snippets of songs here, but whole songs, so we get to hear the ideas, the construction that are behind each of these magnificent pieces of music. We also get lots of concert footage. Now, some of that old concert footage you might have seen on YouTube here or there, especially if you're a big Led Zeppelin fan. But the processing, the resurrecting of these films and audio tracks is done so well that the music sounds like it was recorded yesterday. And we get to see, of course, the expressions of these fans who had never heard Led Zeppelin before. They were expecting the Yardbirds, and they get communication breakdown. What are some of the big points for me? Interviews with John Paul Jones and interviews with John Bonham. Now, I'll talk a little more about the interviews with John Bonham later because they are absolutely fascinating, especially how we even got these recordings to hear. But John Paul Jones, he's such an incredible guy, very modest, doesn't look like a rock star at all. And on a couple occasions, he talked about how his father was proud of him. To see that side of this rock star, this multi-gazillionaire that has inspired so many people, and talking about, even here he is in his 70s, talking about how certain moments of his musical career made his father proud, is absolutely priceless. Hearing from John Bonham is absolutely amazing. These are things you've never heard before. John Bonham rarely gave interviews, but he did give a few, including one in Australia. Now, the director had heard a bootleg of this recording, so he calls the radio station in Australia and asks, "Hey man, do you have recordings?" And they said, no. And then he said, "Well, did you donate them?" And they said, "Oh yeah, we donated them to a university in Canberra." And they said, "Great." So the director of the film goes to the individuals in Canberra and says, "Hey, I understand you've got some interviews with John Bonham and Led Zeppelin. Could I have them?" And they look and they say, "Sorry, we don't see it on our catalog." And he says, "Well, could you possibly have things that are not cataloged?" And they said, "Oh yeah, we've got thousands." And so the director of the film says, "Well, could you listen to him and see if John Bonham's on there?" So they listen to him, and months later, voila. But probably the greatest thing of all you'll see in this film is the reactions that we see from Robert Plant, John Paul Jones, Jimmy Page, when they hear the interviews with John Bonham. Now, they probably had not heard his voice in a very long time, and their reactions are somewhat muted, but you can really see that it's just admiration. It is seeing their good friend again, the man for whom they had so much admiration, and it is really a special moment. Now, for Robert Plant and Jimmy Page, you've seen a lot of them. Jimmy Page, what an architect. He absolutely had a vision for Led Zeppelin. Many of you probably already know that, but the way he explains it is just so clear. And then with the entire song being played, you really get to see just how Jimmy Page really influenced this music and how his visions became our own enjoyment. From Jimmy Page, we hear a lot of things that we've probably already heard before, but it's a new context. We hear about he was a studio musician, and in the studio, he learned a lot about how to record. And so on the original Led Zeppelin 1, he was the producer, and he used techniques that he wanted to use, and he was effectively the owner of the masters. So when he and Peter Grant went to Atlantic Records, they basically just threw it down and said, here it is. No, we're not going to have any singles. And this is the record. This is what you're going to take. We're going to play whole album sides on FM radio. And speaking of Peter Grant, we don't hear much of Peter Grant, but what we do hear is absolutely perfect. He was, of course, the big man, literally and figuratively, in Led Zeppelin. And he went to the Atlantic and said, here's the music, and you're not going to interact with the band. The band have control. If you don't like it, sorry, go your own way. He was a real tough man, and if you've seen The Song Remains the Same, you certainly see how tough he could have been. Robert Plant, we learn about his very humble beginnings right before Led Zeppelin. He was absolutely going nowhere at one point. It's quite humorous. He says all he had was a brown suitcase, and penicillin. Anyway, so the Led Zeppelin movie, Becoming Led Zeppelin, brings us through Led Zeppelin 2. You get incredible interviews, you get incredible music, you get incredible performances, and see it in the theater so you can get that great sound.